Welcome to today's webinar. It's wonderful to be here with participants from all over the world. My name is Maria Sananis. I'm based in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
My name is Eduardo Gentil, and I'm with Cambridge, based in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And we are also joined by our colleague Dina Davinoff, who is assisting us with administrating this webinar. We hope that you're all doing well and staying healthy during this challenging time, and we appreciate this opportunity to talk about the role of family business owners during and after this COVID crisis. We'll present for approximately 30 minutes, and we will then transition into a discussion where we welcome your comments, your questions, and please feel free to submit your questions throughout the presentation by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. There are questions already about whether we will circulate the slides for the webinar, and those will be circulated following the webinar. So, kicking off with our key takeaway, and that is that good owners are not only required for the long-term success of a family business, but they are indeed required during crisis. And when we think about the long-term success of a family business, we know from our research and our observation that having high-performing and enduring companies, along with having capable, talented management teams and organizations, is essential. Both of these are essential. What is foundational is the support of loyal, capable owners and a united, contributing family. So today, our focus is on that role of owners and what kind of value they provide a family business. So they provide stability and security. They're invested in this business. They want to oversee its performance, how it's doing. They want to see it successful over the longer term. They want to see this business transition to a next generation of family owners. And they want their boards and their management teams to really understand what kind of risk they can tolerate. Owners also provide capital to the business. They influence the level of reinvestment in the business and also new investments in the business. And of course, they provide capital, if needed, for cash infusion. Not all family business owners have the same role. They participate and they contribute in different ways. Some are more active, while others more passive. Some operating in the day-to-day as employees and business leaders, while others are active on the board, perhaps. They attend annual shareholder meetings. They might participate on an owner's council, or they might be more focused on entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial opportunities for their ownership group. Owners, in addition to contributing to capital decisions, they make strategic decisions. Again, their management teams, their boards really want to know what the owners want, what kind of direction they want the business to go in. So they make decisions on the business direction. They also make decisions on key people that will provide leadership either in the business at the day-to-day level or at the board level. They influence the culture of the business and also decide on the governance model of the business. So this is the typical role and the kind of value and benefits owners provide the family business. And the question is, what is the role of owners during crisis? Well, let's define the crisis, because the media might have us believe that any kind of developmental step, evolutionary step that a family business goes through is a crisis. We are defining it as a non-routine emergency. And we have seen family businesses go through such crises before. They are either short-term or prolonged. They are predictable or take us by surprise. They are beyond the control of an ownership group, or they're self-inflicted. What we know is that these are the types of crises that have a profound impact on the culture of the family owners and on the business. We know that this type of crisis can lead to the demise of the business or to the continuity and perhaps rejuvenation of the business. So we're here to talk about our current state dealing with this COVID pandemic. And we are in a bit of a fog as we have different unknowns that are impacting us today. We have our environmental unknowns as we try to understand what this virus is, how long it will disrupt us, what kind of impact it'll have on our lives, whether we'll have a V shape, a W shape, a bathtub basin shape recovery, and how it will impact our businesses. What's going to happen to different industries and markets? What kind of projections can be expected in terms of cash and earnings? Will there be government support enough for all? And how will that work? And what will the job markets and what will our supply chains look like going forward? So Eduardo is going to walk us through what owners need to do in response to this crisis.
Thank you, Maria. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with everyone this morning. And I'll start here. And of course, a lot has been written and said about this crisis. What we know is that it is both a health crisis and an economic crisis, that it will tend to have some recurrence, that it is global, it affects all countries and all companies, but of course in different ways. From our board experience and talks to owners, we've seen that some companies in retail, travel, airlines, of course, are suffering tremendously, with 70 to 80% of their revenues dropping from one day to the next. But on the other hand, we also interact with family business owners that have companies in agribusiness and e-commerce and technology. And of course, these companies are seeing a heightened demand. But in both cases, the role of owners has become more critical. And what we would like to do over the next few slides is share with you what we have learned and what we have seen from owners' new role during this crisis. And basically, what we have seen is that owners have tended to focus on three big themes or buckets, and they relate to health, to solvency, and to adaptability. On health, it's really what's closest to us, our employees, the safety of our employees, of our communities, and of course, the safety of our own family members. So a lot of effort and energy dedicated to that. Then we come to solvency, which is the next step, and keeping our business alive during this crisis, and doing this by looking at outside governance assistance, loan payment terms, bank credit lines, access to cash in as many different ways as we can. I'll talk more about that. And then finally, adaptability, looking a bit beyond, right? Despite the difficulty in planning, what can we do in terms of pivoting or adapting as quickly as possible to the new circumstances? And of course, paying attention to the impact that this can have on our employees and on the family. So again, three big themes that owners have been focusing on: health, solvency, and adaptability. What I'll go into next is, as Maria said, over long periods of time, owners have important roles in contributing and growing their family business, which relate to these four pillars. What I'll do now is, in each of these pillars, during the crisis period, of course, things are a bit different, and the focus or the priorities of owners, as we have learned, has been quite different. So starting with stability and security, what we've seen is that families are making their family values more explicit during this time, especially when dealing with employees, customers, and critical suppliers. They're supporting management in as many different ways as they can, in meetings, addressing employees, voicing a public commitment more broadly to the survival and permanence of their business, and finally, keeping the family more informed. So looking at business issues and keeping the family more informed, setting aside disagreements. I'll talk a little bit more about that. The next pillar, fuel for growth. Here we've seen a lot of attention, as you can imagine. Instead of the quarterly sort of updates that owners typically get, they have asked for and are participating in weekly meetings with either their board or the CFO, the CEO, focusing a lot on cash management, looking at spending, debt payments, reviewing their dividend policy. We've seen in several cases owners postponing dividend payments or reducing the minimum dividend payment, looking, of course, at other sources of capital, and lastly, looking at how they might reallocate capital from other parts of their portfolio of businesses to those businesses that need more capital. There are a few examples of this that I've seen, but the big one, of course, is retailers, education companies looking much more at investing in technological platforms and so forth. But there are other examples as well. And of course, you have to be fortunate enough to have in your portfolio some businesses that can support other more urgent situations. And then finally, what we've seen is owners getting involved and requesting month-by-month financial scenario analysis, looking out 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months, what is happening to our cash position. And as you know the saying, cash is king. The one thing that we know will kill a company is if it runs out of cash. On the third pillar, family talent, this is an important one and quite unique really in this situation. And I think the main point here is that we've seen family owners bring in other family members to participate in different forums, to be able to learn from and contribute to different initiatives, be it in the business or in terms of philanthropy and social initiatives. They've also begun to invite next generation members whenever possible to participate in forums, to learn from what's happening. And we think that's a terrific, opportunity. One of the sort of bright lights in this situation that we're in. And lastly, not less important, is while owners are more involved, be careful to clarify the roles of owners versus the board and the CEO. I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So a lot of opportunity for involving the family. Finally, on strategic decisions, and these are key, there are various important decisions that are being made that affect the reputation of the company, the reputation of owners. And of course, over time, that is one of the key things that owners contribute to their institutions, to their businesses, are the values of the owners, and especially as those are seen in times of crisis. So decisions related to value preservation, reputation of the owners assume a much higher priority, and of course require that owners dive deeply and get involved in those key decisions, some of which I will mention shortly. And then finally, contingency planning. While management is very immersed in the urgent day-to-day things that have to happen, it is the owner's role, and we've seen them doing this, to raise their horizon and look at contingency plans under different scenarios. Especially important when you have the degree of uncertainty that we have still today. So what I've tried to do here is then share with you within the 4 pillars, what are the more specific things and priorities that owners have taken upon themselves during this time of crisis. And just to share a little bit more specific, a few examples. And you see here that there are jagged lines that separate the different roles and decisions. And on the left, you see important decisions that are being considered now, namely a large number of layoffs or furloughs, postponement of payments to suppliers, but very carefully, or closing or shutting down temporarily certain activities. Well, typically, of course, in all of these cases, right, the management recommends and either the CEO approves or the board approves. But what we've seen recently is that owners are moving into these decisions and take, for example, the middle one, postponing payments to key suppliers or vendors, typically owners would be more on the right side, just wanting to be informed. But what we've seen, and we think it's correct, that owners are moving to the left, are interacting with boards and with suppliers directly. The suppliers appreciate having access to owners whenever possible. And so what we've seen really is, one, owners getting much more involved, right, in numerous decisions that in other times they would have delegated. So under those circumstances, it is very important that owners be very clear as to what are the boundaries and the frontiers and the decision-making that each party has to have to avoid confusion. It's not easy, but it's an important trend and a point of attention, we believe. Lastly, I wanted to share with you other topics and themes that have arisen in our conversation with owners and on boards of various family-owned companies all over the world. And these are the big themes that we have seen owners pay attention to and learn from. I won't read all of them, but there are 7 themes. The first one, appreciation, certainly for the public, and support for public healthcare workers, educators, more attention to what doctors and scientists are saying. But a second point, very important here under appreciation, is the appreciation for longer-term planning on succession. We don't know what can happen. We want to be prepared. And governance. I'll just mention now, Maria will talk about this later, but we believe that countries and companies with good governance will come out of this crisis strengthened and with a greater competitive differential. The other point is cash management, which I've mentioned. It has become a daily priority. Owners get involved, especially institutionally, in talking to lenders and banks. Technology, I've mentioned briefly, but you've heard a lot about this, but the world will not be the same after this. We know. We don't know exactly how, but we know that technology will be a bigger element in our companies and in our lives. Supply chains, reviewing those to be less vulnerable and less dependent. Portfolio review, let's look at everything we have and what the risks are in each of those parts of our wealth and our portfolio. Customer service, always a competitive consideration, but customers and clients will pay attention to how companies and owners treated them and approached them during this time of crisis, and that will leave an important consequence as we get out of this. And then finally, the job market and a more difficult, more disciplined perhaps approach to all of our staff, employees, leadership in our companies, and greater clarity on what are the leaders and employees that are essential for us to keep during this time of crisis, in which employees eventually, if things worsen, we will have to take other decisions on. So these are the 7 big issues that we've seen owners talk about, get involved with, and learn a lot from. And so I'll stop there. I have one more concept I wanted to share with you. Those of you who know Cambridge, have seen our work, know that when we talk about owners and boards, we often show the picture of a jet plane or of the view of 30,000 feet. And we encourage owners and boards to really take that higher view when dealing or interacting with management. Today, what we are seeing and we recommend and we support is not so much the 30,000 view of the jet plane, but the maybe 5,000 foot view of the helicopter, where you can have more clarity and more access to contribute to key points. And then I'll just end. You've all seen the report probably that came out yesterday or the day before in terms of what the magnitude is of what we're talking about. Of course, there are many disagreements on this, but just to remember that the impact of this is global, and the IMF estimates that we will globally have a shrinkage in GDP of about 3%, 3 to 4%, and that's roughly the economy of Japan and Germany put together. Again, it'll be very different, but owners have a key responsibility in reacting to the crisis. So let me finish there and pass it back to Maria, who will shed some light on going forward and what can we look to do.
Thank you, Eduardo. As we think about the agenda of owners post-crisis, we're hearing a lot from families that they're ready for that conversation once they have stability with their cash situation. So once they have figured out week by week, month by month, how to manage, they're ready to take a step back and really reflect on where they are today, where they might go in the future, and how they want to get there. So the first step post-crisis is to really evaluate the impact of the crisis. And as we said, some families have started doing that already. The other opportunity here is to put in place for the next crisis response, be it recurrent or any other crisis to this level. A lot of families are learning about what they have done well so far, what they wish they would have done differently, and how they have been able to lean on their teams and on their governance processes to move forward during this crisis. There is a possibility that based on the impact of the crisis, the vision for the future trajectory of the business will need to be revisited. So what do the owners want going forward? Is there a renewed vision, either for their business or their collective portfolio? And do you have the right governance model to lean on to achieve the new vision? Is it a time now where you're moving from having a solid management team to incorporating and establishing a corporate board? Is it time to allow the family council to do the good work that it does? And now do you want to create an owner's council that is more focused on owner issues? Now is a good time to really think about that model. And of course, we see a lot of owners, family business owners, who are very good at understanding the operations of their business. They understand what drives their business. They have an operator's mindset when they look at their business. And we are encouraging owners to think about developing an owner's mindset among the group of owners. And that is a mindset that is prepared to constantly be thinking about this VUCA world that we're living in. The COVID crisis is a great reminder that our environments, our family business environments, are in this world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. So what does it require to get that owner's mindset? It requires taking a step back, gaining that altitude, and really clarifying what our long-term goals should be as owners. It's really important that you take the time to challenge your attachments to your business models, to your traditions, to your legacies, and to think about looking outward, going to conferences, really tracking what the new startups are doing to address the macro trends. Are there new opportunities, new threats that you should know about? All of that is learned by looking outward and not necessarily just focusing inward on your companies and your operations. As owners, you have such an influence on the culture of the family business, making sure that there is a degree of research and development that is very innovative, constantly thinking ahead about what is required to adapt to this VUCA world. And of course, having the discipline to let go of investments in people that are not working for you. And to have these types of conversations, to have these types of discussions, it takes practice, and it also takes a level of unity that will allow owners to come to the table and agree and reinvigorate what their mission is as it relates to their family business, and to agree on their approach for how they want to manage the enterprise and treat one another. And so with that, we're pleased to turn to a discussion with you where we have the opportunity to hear your comments and welcome your questions.
I would just like to thank everybody for participating. I think the topic is a fascinating one for all of us involved. Huge opportunities, especially for the next generation to learn. And so thank you. And any additional thoughts, comments, or suggestions, we welcome, and we learn from you as much as we can during these webinars as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.